This scene opens with a young man with his arms tied behind his back. There's no doubt that he's our protagonist, because he introduces himself as Lu Meng, the novelist. But now, he's got a small problem that changes everything, and it turns out to be not so small after all, because he's actually dead. Lu Meng is brought to his knees in another realm at a place called the Palace of Hell. He's kneeling with weird animal guards surrounding him with weapons, and a certain man named Lord Yama finally addresses him. Lord Yama, the god who decides whether your soul should enter heaven or hell, furiously slaps his chair as he talks about how heinous Lu Meng is. In response to the man's angry screaming, the writer explains that he was simply busy typing some words and took a short break before finding himself in this place. It turns out that before Lu Meng died, he was busy working until he spared some time to do some online shopping. Because of this, he doesn't really get why the angry man thinks that he's heinous, because he's sure that he didn't do anything wrong. And it's not like he stole from anyone or robbed anyone either. He certainly didn't kill anyone or set up fire anywhere. So as far as he's concerned, he shouldn't be treated so harshly. Lu Meng tries to defend himself because he's basically on trial right now, but then the angry Lord Yama suddenly hits back at him, asking him if he's written a tragic novel recently. Our boy is shocked when he hears this question pop out from the blue, because it's really random. He informs the weird judge that the question doesn't have anything to do with him being heinous, and at the same time, we see that he's sweating a lot more than before. Lu Meng is clearly panicking now, because even though he's trying to act dumb in front of Lord Yama, he totally knows what the angry judge is talking about. It appears that our protagonist finished a book recently when he was still alive. In this story, everything goes smoothly in the life of Ik-yong, who turns out to be the main character. But all the smooth running only begins after Yi's blood spirit wakes up, allowing him to make his way into the top 10 rankings all of a sudden, after being considered a nobody his whole life. Even though everything else is going well for Yi-cheong in this story, Lu Meng decides that it would be okay if he made things difficult for the hero and his love interest to get together. Our boy admits that he's received a lot of blades from readers because of this decision, and some of them even go as far as sending him threatening calls. It's really crazy if you think about it, considering the fact that it's his own story. I mean, why attack the person who came up with an idea in the first place just because you don't like some part? Anyway, Lu Meng eventually bowed to the pressure and decided to give the people what they want. So after the protagonist of his story defeats the big villain with his invincible plot armor, he arranges a special moment for Yi-chang to have a sexual relationship with the heroine. Unfortunately, things didn't end well in the story after Lu made this rash decision, because it turns out that he ended up acting impulsively out of anger once again. This eventually led to the destruction of the novel world he had created and nurtured so carefully before things went south. At this point, it becomes quite obvious to us that this is the tragic story Lord Yama is talking about, and there's no longer any doubt that Lu Meng is guilty of the accusation. The angry Lord Yama is furious when he sees that our boy is trying to play dumb with him. It turns out that the guy had been following Lu Meng's story for a whole year. He was one of those people who had been waiting for Yi-cheong and the heroine to get together, and just when they all felt that it was finally going to happen, they were just met with tragic news because the story abruptly ended with the world being destroyed all of a sudden. Lord Yama was such a big fan of the novel, following everything that was happening in that world, but his passion for Lu's book only left him with a heart that was broken to pieces. Our boy is shocked when he sees the grown man sobbing like a baby, all because of the crazy ending, and is a bit bewildered to know that his novel was actually being read by a god. Unfortunately for the writer, this angry man isn't in any mood for pleasantries right now, so he suddenly snaps at Lu Meng, telling our boy to shut the hell up. He's still really mad at our boy for ruining the amazing story he started, because not only did he fail to update his chapters on time, but he also gave it such a hasty ending which all the readers hated. Lord Yama reveals that our boy originally had 90 years to live, but now that he pissed him off with his annoying story, he has decided to cut away 2/3 of that lifespan. Hearing this, the guy starts to beg for his life all of a sudden. He tells Lord Yama that he hasn't even married yet, and starts explaining why he doesn't want to die young, slamming his head into the ground over and over like a crazy person. Lu Meng begs the king of the palace of hell with everything that he's got, so after a really weird display, the old man finally changes his mind. Seeing how much Lu still wants to live, he decides that he's going to give the young man a wife before sending him to the novel world and saving it from the inside. However, there's a catch to this change in plans. The green-eyed king of hell informs Lu Meng that he has no choice but to save the novel world, because if by any chance he fails to do so, he'll grab his soul by the balls and crush it into powder. I guess our boy must now go into the world of the novel that he wrote to try and fix all the things he messed up inside it. Lord Yama insists that Lu Meng has to change the terrible ending he wrote before and then prevent the world from getting destroyed in 10 years. Because if he doesn't succeed in this mission, he's going to be single for every year of his life in the story. And just like that, our boy is sent to the novel world he created to save it. Yu Meng screams like a girl the whole time that he plummets into the water, and it's only after he's in a free fall that the dumb guards realize that they forgot to feed apparently, that tea was supposed to erase all of his past life memories so he couldn't use them to give himself a head start in the story. They both know that they could get in trouble for such an error, but at the same time, it's already too late to change anything. So now their only option is to just see how things go and hope for the best. The next day, in a place called Nalon City, we see that our boy has already made a big appearance. He's been reincarnated in the story he wrote as a certain kept man who happens to be well known around. Lu landed in the middle of the place and has been sleeping there for a while. He must have really enjoyed the nap because he drooled a whole lot on the floor, leaving a huge puddle. So much so that people in the city start to gather around because they recognize him. The noise wakes Lu up, and that's when he sees that he's been reincarnated into the body of a really good-looking character. He has white skin, and he's also so young, so he's really happy about this part of the arrangement. The people start to whisper all of a sudden, and that's when he hears that he is actually the kept man, Lai Yuguo, and the family of their city lord. From what they're saying, it appears that Lai Yuguo has a habit of going crazy, so they're not too surprised to see him sleeping in the middle of the road. Our boy hears everything they're saying and gets really upset, but this look of annoyance changes suddenly when he discovers that his wife is the city lord. It's shocking, but it's true, and everyone knows that he would probably have died 300 times if he was married to anyone else. Just then, he takes a look at the golden tag that was on his neck and realizes that he's actually the kept man, named Lai Yuguo, so he finally accepts the fact that he's really in his novel world. The reality dawns on him quite quickly, so he starts to lose his shit all of a sudden. Apparently, the reason why he has such delicate skin is because he's Lai Yuguo, a villain and kept man who always fails to play it cool. This is clearly a very bad trait because it just leads him to commit all forms of crimes and act tyrannically. In this story, he ends up forcing himself on the girl that the protagonist loves, so he ends up getting killed, but not before getting his whiner chopped off by the main character of the story. Just thinking about it makes him scared, so he quickly raises his robe to check if his ding-dong is still there. Thankfully it is, and he's relieved that he still has time to avert such terrifying outcomes. At least he still has his dick, but now he starts to think about what a tough life he's about to start living in the story, so he just bangs his head on a pillar in frustration, while all the people walking by give him judging looks, wondering what the hell is wrong with him this time around. After his little tantrum, he calms himself down and thinks about the situation calmly. At this point, the whole world will be destroyed in the end, regardless of who the hero and villain are. It's his novel, so he knows how everything works, like where he can get all the treasures, so he concludes that the experience won't be so bad, because he's literally the creator of the place. His thoughts are interrupted when something suddenly hits him in the head, so he's furious, because he was disturbed, even though he wasn't causing any trouble. He takes a closer look at the box, and sees that it was sent to him through the Gale Express. When he opens the box, he sees the pepper he ordered online, as well as a letter from Lord Young. So, he reads it out and sees that the crazy king of the Palace of Hell has been merciful enough to give him an alimum system to help him complete his task. Lord Yang concludes by saying that he's much kinder than Lu Meng, but right now, the writer doesn't really care about that because he's just trying to figure out what the hell an alimum is. Just then, the Alamum shopping platform is activated and a menu pops up in front of him, revealing that he can shop from there while the goods will be delivered by the Gale Express at any time. Seeing this, a wide smile appears on Leah's face because he realizes that this must be the legendary Golden Finger. It turns out that the protagonist in Lu's novel uses a similar shopping platform to get quick improvement, become a sect leader, marry a rich beauty, before heading up to the pinnacle of his life. However, that system is called the Aladad, and the protagonist in his story can only pick random items by raffle. On the other hand, Lu can pick the exact things he wants at will on the Alamum. He recalls that the novel world will be destroyed in 10 years and admits that it will be very difficult to change it. But then again, now that he has the Alamum system, he feels that the mission will be a piece of cake thanks to his extraordinary wisdom. Our boy suddenly notices his financial status, so he concludes that Lord Yama is actually too mean. He has no money at all, and he feels that the old geezer should have at least given him some funds to start up his new life. All of a sudden, Lu hears galloping around and immediately feels a chill in his back. It's a familiar noise, because that's the galloping of his wife's horse. His beautiful wife appears sure enough, but strangely, she's got a whip in her hand and looks really mean all of a sudden. She feels that he's trying to sneak out again, and even though she's clearly about to punish him, he can't help but zone out in excitement when he sees just how pretty his wife is. He tells him to hop on so they can go back home and then whips him in the back like he's the horse or something. Not wanting to experience that stinging sensation again, he calmly tells her to wait so that he can explain that he wasn't trying to escape. Unfortunately, she doesn't give a shit about his explanation and demands that he get on the horse immediately. People passing by witness the scene and start to feel sorry for our boy because they know he's about to suffer some domestic violence again. Nalan Meng hung him on a tree and flogged the shit out of him, so this time they wonder what kind of corporal punishment the poor guy will suffer at her hands. The levels of martial artists in this world are organized based on power and in descending order. You'll have the martial emperor first, then the martial sage, the martial grandmaster, the martial master, martial great lord, martial spirit, the martial senior, right above the martial junior, and then finally the martial apprentice, which is where our boy is. Nalan is the 9th daughter of the 3rd prince, who happens to be the ever-victorious general of the Heian state. Nalan is already a martial spirit, even though she's only 19 years old, and she's already made a name for herself, killing countless enemies in battle. Such an attractive, yet dangerous young girl is rare in this world. But her husband, Li Yuo, is a well-known kept man. Lu thinks about how he's been a martial apprentice for the past 10 years without any progress, and while he's still thinking about this, he gets distracted by a scent which smells like roses. It turns out that the amazing fragrance is coming from his wife, who's currently riding the horse while he sits in the back. It's his first time being so close to a girl, so he reaches out to touch her, but she threatens to cut off his fingers if he dares it. Of course, he's frightened by her, and since he still needs his fingers, he just keeps his hands to himself. Soon, they arrive at the city lord's mansion in Nielon City, which is also Lu's house because that's where his wife lives. Once they're inside, she tells him to go to the ancestral hall with her, so he does, and as he walks right behind her, the maids in the mansion gossip about how Lu will be beaten up again now that he's been caught. Inside the hall, Nielon lights a candle in front of a small shrine and commands our boy to kneel with her. The writer is shocked at how skilled the body is at kneeling down. While he's busy bothering himself with that, Nielon apologizes to her parents-in-law for not being able to discipline her husband well enough, and then she asks for their forgiveness. Lu takes a look at what she's praying to and realizes that it's the memorial tablets of his late parents. Even though Lai Yuguo isn't a good person, it turns out that his father, Lai Guangyi, was actually a legend and respected as a god of war of the He-Oshin state. Lai Guangyi was also known as the famous Devil Surrenderer General. He and Nalan's father were sword brothers, and they were called the 2 heroes of the He-Oshin state. It all makes sense now, because the only reason Lai Yuguo was even qualified to marry Nalan in the first place was because of who his father was. Unfortunately, they haven't consummated their marriage yet because it appears that Nalan actually despises her husband's incapability and cowardice. This also explains why Lai Yugo has to flirt with different women all the time, but Naoen always catches him at the crucial moment and beats him up. If it wasn't for the respect she had for Lai Yugo's parents, there's no doubt that she'd have divorced the kept man already. Just over half a year in the future, the protagonist of the novel will attack Naoen's city, and Naoen will do her best to defend the city, but it will eventually be captured while she will be killed. By then, Lai Yugo will finally realize the error in his ways, but it will be too late. With all of this being said, it's pretty hard not to see that Nalan actually has a pretty difficult life. Because of this, our boy figures that maybe the city won't be captured during the invasion if he starts developing it now. He knows that he can use the alum to make some effort, but he's not sure he can use the money in this world to shop from the system, so he decides that he has to try it out. Suddenly, Nalan asks him to tell her if he snuck out to flirt with women or if he went to gamble this time around. In a shocking twist, he simply tells her that he thinks there's still hope to save their city. Nalan can't believe her ears and is shocked because he might actually be onto something meaningful for the first time ever. Unfortunately, he doesn't explain properly and ends up asking her for 100 coins, which just makes her furious because she thinks that he's only going to flirt or gamble with the money. My guy has a lot in the way of building trust with the people around him, but this is honestly the most entertaining start to a story I could have hoped for. As we resume the story, we see that not so surprisingly, Nalan is absolutely furious because she thinks that her deadbeat husband is just trying to get money from her with an excuse so that he can go gambling and flirting again. Seeing the look of rage on her face, Lu quickly assures her that he's not going to gamble with the money she gives him. In fact, he's already got a very good idea how he's going to invest the money in business. Our boy's practically got a roadmap in his head already, and right now, all he needs is the right amount of capital so that he can get right down to business. After listening to Lai Yuguo's brilliant idea, the look of anger suddenly disappears from Nalan's face, and then it quickly turns into shock with a little bit of confusion. The martial spirit is pretty stunned and can't help but notice how serious her husband actually looks while talking. It's like he's a completely new man because, for the first time ever, he actually looks and sounds like a responsible man, not some gambling womanizer. She takes a closer look at him and begins to wonder if he's finally changed for good. While she's still trying to come to a conclusion, Lai notices that she's staring at him with a puzzled look on her face. So he figures that she might blow his cover if he suddenly changes his personality all of a sudden. That would be really bad for him too, because if she finds out that he's some intruder using her husband's body, there's no doubt that she's going to kill him. With all of this in mind, he tries to act like the former kept man so that she doesn't suspect a thing. To do this, he tells her how he saw people in the slums of the South Pole who were skinny for lack of food. He admits that he doesn't want to see dead people all over the city and suggests that it would be bad luck for them. Hearing that last statement, all of Nalan's doubts are cleared all of a sudden. She concludes that her husband hasn't changed at all because, from what he just said, he's still the same self-centered man he's always been. Despite feeling that Lai Yuguo still only cares about his own feelings, Nalan is glad to see that he wants to take the first step to do something for the city. Thanks to Lu Meng's little speech, he managed to convince her that the money will go into something useful and productive for the town as a whole. So she tosses him a bag of coins and gives him the green light to begin a project that he has in mind. Unfortunately, Nalan can only spare 50 coins for him right now because the persistent drought continues to torment the city, and all the money had to be used to help the victims. It sounds like a measly amount to her, but to our boy, 50 coins is a lot of money. After all, he just wants to try and see if the novel world money will allow him to buy things from the Alaman system. Li Yuguo struts out of the hall victoriously, feeling really fulfilled that he could get the cash, and while he makes his way out of the place, the maids from earlier go have a chat with Naolan. They are surprised that their boss actually believed her renowned liar and deadbeat husband. They've got a strong feeling about that. Li Yuguo is just going to squander the money again. In response, Naolan doesn't actually agree with them. Despite knowing her husband's reputation, she still feels there is something different this time around. This time, she feels that he has changed. The scene changes, and all of a sudden, we're taken to the streets of Nalan City. Our boy makes his way outside, with money in his hands for the first time. So he's eager to check if it works with the alamum system before anything else. Lumong stares at the sack of coins with so much hope in his eyes right before activating the alamum online shopping platform. He checks his status window and is delighted to see that the system detected his new balance. Just like our boy suspected, real money in this novel world works for the online shopping platform, and so he now has 50 coins available for spending on the online shop. The writer just gets really excited because he now has money to buy things, and while he's happily exploring the alarm system, something strange happens. Out of nowhere, someone creeps up on him from behind, and before he can sense the strange presence behind him, the man grabs him and holds his chest for some weird reason. Lumong is absolutely horrified when he feels the sensation, and so he shoves the man away and turns around to defend himself. He snaps at the man for groping him like that and asks him what the hell he wants from him. In response, the weirdo just smiles at him like a psychopath and begins to rub his hands like he's some evil genius. Seeing how agitated Lai Yuguo has become, the short stranger tells the famous kept man not to misunderstand him. The short man suddenly reveals that he smelled some Western pepper on our boy and claims that he only touched him because he wanted to verify that he was actually right about his guess. It turns out that the can of pepper our boy received from the Gale Express earlier is still with him. In fact, it's inside his robes for some reason. And it makes one wonder why he hasn't started using it as a spray when there are so many creeps walking around the streets of Nalan City. Anyway, he takes out the can and confirms that the short psycho was right. He notices that the guy seems very interested in the Western pepper, so he flaunts it in front of the guy. For some reason, it appears that pepper is a really rare commodity in the place because Lumong starts showing it off to the guy, talking about how it took a lot of effort to acquire. He shakes the pepper in front of the guy to entice him, and it works like a charm. The stranger sniffs it like a drughead, desperate for crack, and after confirming that it's exactly what he's been looking for, he suddenly offers to buy it off Lumong's hands for 50 coins. Our boy is stunned when he hears the huge offer because he can't believe anyone would want to pay that much for a can of pepper. The guy notices that he doesn't say anything, so he assumes that the silence means dissatisfaction, and then he doubles his offer, claiming that he's willing to pay 100 coins for it. The writer is still too stunned to speak, so the guy suddenly offers 150 taels for the Western pepper, but still our boy doesn't say anything, which forces this strange man to make an offer of 200 coins all of a sudden. The short man gets to this point in desperation and admits that he can't up the offer any more than this because he won't be able to make any profit if he purchases the pepper above 200 taels. The whole time he's been rambling on and offering more money. Liugo has just been looking at him as a silly person who has a lot of money, realizing that 200 coins is a lot more than he imagined he'd be getting for the pepper. He decides to sell it to the short man at this amount and then hands over the pepper to the man in exchange for a big fat bag of coins. In the process of the deal, the man calls our boy a shrewd man and asks him what his name is, so he introduces himself to the guy and says the same thing to him. The man that asks him to reveal where he found the peppers, and of course, the clever writer makes it clear to him that he won't do that because it's going to ruin his business. Seeing that the pepper seller won't tell him anything, the wealthy stranger doesn't ask him anymore. Instead, he finally introduces himself, revealing that his name is Shida Sheng. With a weird smile on his face, he asks our boy if he can sell all the pepper he has to him in the future. Shida Sheng tells Lai that he can choose any one of the stalls, claiming that it's a gift that he has given to him. With a bored expression on his face, he looks around the stall and spots a certain bottle, so he asks the fat man what's inside it. In response, Shida Sheng explains that it's an unknown flower seed. When Lai hears it, he takes out the seed and pours it on his hand to take a better look. The fat man then tells him that he can take it if he likes it. He even suggests that our boy can give it to his lover or something, even though he's clearly not very comfortable around the guy yet. Lai truly does appreciate the gift, so he thanks Shida Sheng for the flower seed and waves him goodbye before heading off. In response, the fat man tells our boy not to forget about what he promised him earlier. He's still very much interested in being the only person that Lai sells all of his pepper to in the future, So he wants to be sure that the purple-haired man won't break their deal. On the way out, our boy casually assures the fat man that he will keep his word. Barely moments after that, we see that our boy is back in the Alamoon system, probably hoping to check if his balance has changed. After activating it, he's informed that a new object has been detected. It's the moon spirit grass, and it turns out that Lai is really delighted to see that. Apparently, the moon spirit grass is something that can help him gather spiritual kai, and also be greatly helpful for cultivation. He's not exactly surprised to see the item in his inventory, and he's also really glad that the rich fat guy from earlier didn't know he had such a rare item in his possession. His excitement is cut short when he suddenly notices something strange. It appears that there are a few new lines in his status window. He notices that there's now a slot for the present villain plot armor in. He's the villain, so it makes sense that he's only got 2% progress here. On the other hand, the present protagonist plot armor is at 98%. That's right, his rival Yi Qiang is certainly far above him in this regard, and it's not much of a surprise since he's the bad guy in this story. One's percentage of plot armor will rise after he grasps the other's opportunity. In other words, when the villain's plot armor reduces to 0%, then doomsday will come ahead of time. This means that Lai Yuguo's fate is really now in his own hands, because he needs to increase his plot armor if he wants to stay longer in this story, because whenever it goes to 0, then the doomsday won't be far away. Our boy ponders on this and ponders on the situation. It's not like there's anything new here though, because he practically wrote the entire story himself. He overhears someone talking about how his saber is on sale in the background, and when Lai Yuguo turns to take a look, he sees several people gathered around someone. They're all watching this person in excitement, and some are even cheering him on. We finally get to see this person who wants to sell off his sword. The guy claims that his family treasures the saber, and tells the people that it's so sharp that it can even cut easily through iron. Despite the sword being a family treasure, as he says, the guy is willing to let go of the saber for 80 coins, and he makes this announcement to all the people around. Unfortunately for the guy, the other men feel that his item is overpriced. As far as they're concerned, it's just a broken saber, and they conclude that he must be messing with them to try and sell it for a whopping 80 coins. To one of them, 8 coins is more than enough to let go of the saber, and while he's still trying to convince the seller, another one of them suggests that the coins is a fairer price, so he makes his own bid as well. The one-eyed saber seller takes a close look at his precious item and informs the men that 80 coins is already cheap enough. After all, he wouldn't be selling it if it wasn't for the fact that his wife is very ill. He clearly needs the money to take care of her, so he can't sell his family's treasure for money that won't even be able to save his wife. Seeing that the old men around aren't ready to make serious offers, Mr. Eyepatch decides that he's not going to sell it anymore. The saber is already too valuable to him, so he sheathes the blade back and tightens his grip on the sword, suggesting that he's not letting it go. Of course, the troubling old men don't miss the chance to make a fuss out of the situation. They conclude that he must be trying to fool them because he wanted to sell the saber just now, and suddenly regrets it. For all they know, he might even do the same thing after selling the saber, so they feel that they have to do something about it. They decide that they can't let him off the hood so easily, and then inform him that he has to leave the saber behind. Our boy sees that it's only a matter of time before a full-blown fight breaks out, so he quickly shouts for the men to stop their arguing. Surprisingly, the place goes calm all of a sudden, and it makes you realize that people in Nalan City actually give a shit what Lai Yuguo says or does. Apparently, the clever writer's personality is also starting to change how people used to see the irresponsible kept man who messed up a lot. Our boy tries to end the quarrel quickly by telling the guy with the eye patch that he doesn't necessarily have to sell the sword since it's his family's treasured saber. The old men are shocked when they see Mr. Lai in their midst and not in some gambling house, wasting his time. For the first time, he actually speaks like a man with authority, so it makes them even more conscious of his presence. Since he's already the matrilocal husband and the city lord, Nalan. When the old man realizes that a man with such authority is defending the saber seller, they decide to let Mr. I patch off the hook finally. Our boy nonchalantly tells the men that they've made the right choice before using his hand to wave them away like flies. He tells them to get lost and so it may take a few seconds before they're nowhere to be found anymore. Once the two geezers are out of the picture, Lytos is the owner of the saber, a bag of coins. He reveals that he heard what the guy said earlier and then tells him that he can keep his saber instead of selling it for money. The guy catches the bag of money with a really confused look on his face because he didn't expect it and he's not even sure if it's not a prank or something. He's still trying to wrap his head around it when Lyugo tells him to take the 100 coins to solve his problem. Our boy says this and then gives him the kind of warm smile you only get from heroes, which is pretty ironic because he's actually supposed to be the villain in this story. The guy is still really shocked when he hears this, but it appears that he still hasn't processed the whole thing yet because he's still in a daze. On the other hand, those old men who were troubling him earlier didn't actually disappear before. Turns out that they were still hanging around, so the moment they hear Lyugo giving the guy 100 coins, they're absolutely flabbergasted. Just then, we see a knee touch the floor, and it's no surprise that it's the guy with the eye patch kneeling down. It's probably dawned on him how much the city lord's husband has done for him, so he kneels down to show his gratitude. The guy with the eye patches is so touched that he reveals his identity. He tells our boy that his name is Guan Yunfen, and then claims that he will never forget this kind act. Because of life, this guy will now be able to save his wife's life. You can imagine how grateful he is, so it's not too surprising when he vows to repay the kept man someday in the future. Guan Yunfen remains on his knees for a while, as he continues to show how much he appreciates the kind gesture, but our boy simply asks him to get up and tells him that it's nothing. While he's helping the one-eyed man back on his feet, one of the old scumbags from earlier suddenly reappears. The bald old hag tries to make Lai regret his decision, claiming that the guy with the saber might not be telling the truth about his wife and all. For some reason, this old geezer feels that everyone is as crafty and selfish as he is, so he suggests that maybe Lai Yugo should be afraid that Guan Yunfen might be a liar. In response, our boy just laughs at the cunning old man's statement. He doesn't mind giving Guan Yunfen the money because, as far as he is concerned, it's actually worth it if it means that he'll be able to see through a man. I mean, just by what he did, he was able to see just how selfish the old men were because they just couldn't hide their greed. Even earlier, money pushed them to almost fight a man for a saber that has been in his family for years, all because they were greedy. Because of this, Lai Yuguo just laughs out loud, not feeling even a tad regretful about what he did. His happy face suddenly disappears, however, because he suddenly remembers that he told the old hags to get lost earlier. He glares at the nosy man, asking him what the hell he's still doing there, so the two troublesome geezers walk away shamefully. They leave the scene feeling really upset. After all, they just lost twice. First was when they lost the opportunity to steal the saber, and the second time was when Lai gave Guan Yunfen 100 coins. They probably wish it was them, in the one-eyed man's shoes. But it's a good thing our boy was wise enough to see through them. The old geezers hiss on the way out, lamenting about how Lai takes himself too seriously because of his wife's identity. Even though it's none of their business, they're just still really bitter about the fact that he would give 100 coins to a rough man like Guan Yunfen. Unlike the two idiots complaining about money that isn't theirs to give, the clever writer knows that this so-called rough man is actually the top chivalrous robber, king of thieves. Of course, he knows this when no one else does. After all, he's the one who wrote the story. So in the end, it looks like our hero is somewhat ahead of the curve when it comes to saving his future ass. After Guan Yunfen thanks him for the bag of coins, Lai Yuguo bids the guy farewell and wishes him a pleasant journey ahead as he watches him walk away. Our boy suddenly gives us a sneak peek into the reason for his decision earlier. It turns out that according to his story, the king of thieves should have actually been saved by the protagonist, Yi Chiyoung. If that had happened, Guan Yunfen would have become a loyal friend of the main protagonist. But now, that's no longer the case because it appears that our boy might just have altered the original timeline with his kind gesture. Lu Meng admits that he didn't expect to come across the king of thieves so early on, because now he's gotten to meet him before Yi Chiyoung. As you'd expect, this turn of events is actually a good thing for our boy, because now he hasn't only just earned 100 coins for himself, but now he's also met the king of thieves and gotten himself a valuable seat as well. Everything seems to be working out just fine for the author, even though he was initially afraid that he'd have a horrible life as the most hated villain in the story. While Ugo happily looks at his inventory again and is delighted to see that he has a balance of 150 teals, which he can use to purchase things on the alarm system. To him, he's already achieved quite a lot already in one day, so he decides that it's time for him to head back to the city lord's mansion, where he's sure that his dominatrix of a wife would be waiting for him to see what he did with the money. The scene changes, and we're taken back to Nalan's mansion, where we see that our boy is just as eager to see her as she must have been to see him. Before even setting his eyes on her, he yells out to her, announcing his return. We finally get to see her, and it appears that she's in the middle of a training session. Considering that she already knows what a scumbag her husband has been, she quickly asks him if he's lost all the money she gave him in gambling so soon. The stern look on her face suggests that she won't hesitate to give Lai Yiguo the beating of his life if it turns out to be true. But she has no idea that the man she married is now a completely different person. In response, the clever writer tells her that such a thing is impossible, and then reaches into his robe to reveal the huge profit he made in a single day. With a proud smile plastered on his face, he shows her the fat sack of coins and informs her that it contains 100 coins inside. In less than 24 hours, the once lossy, wasteful kept man has managed to double the capital, returning both the principal and the interest to his little investor, so you can imagine just how utterly shocked Nalan must be when she sees this. It's absolutely unbelievable because this is someone she's been living with for a while now, in her dumbfounded state. She manages to ask him how on earth he managed to earn so much money in just one afternoon. The whole time she keeps staring at the bag of coins in her hand, probably trying to figure out if it's her imagination or something, because she just can't fathom it. As if she wasn't already perplexed enough, Lai Yuguo smugly informs her that he has already kept 50 coins for himself. Just when it looks like our clever writer is finally starting to change the narrative people have about him, a very annoying voice chimes in to ruin everything. The person suggests that Lai Yuguo probably won the money from a gamble, since that's the personality they're familiar with. This nosy troublemaker turns out to be Lai Yudeng, and our boy is extremely surprised when he sees the guy around. Just by looking at Lai Yudeng, you can tell that he's a really arrogant person, the kind of person who probably thinks he's better than everyone else because of how good-looking he is. The guy just fans himself and ignores the look of shock on Lai Yuguo's face. It turns out that Lai Yudeng is actually the adopted son of Lai Yuguo's father. And as if the rivalry wasn't already bad enough, the guy has already managed to become a Marshal Jr., while the kept man is still at the lowest level in the rankings. After listening to what Lai Yudeng said, Nalan Meng suspects that it might actually be true, so she puts her husband on the spot and asks him if he really earned all that money by gambling. In response, he reminds her that he only ever loses his money while betting, so he explains that he wouldn't think of gambling again when he already knows how bad his luck is with it. After making this point, he goes on to reveal that he actually made the profit by doing business. He's not even slightly nervous while talking, because he knows that it's the truth. Our boy is so confident in himself that he tells Nalan to check out what he's saying in the market if she still doesn't believe him. Even though nobody was talking to Lai Yudeng, he still makes sure to be a nosy motherfucker and taunts Nalan, suggesting that she actually needs to check it. Thankfully, the city lord still has enough faith in her husband to believe his words, so she ignores Lai Yudeng's idea and gives Yuguo back the bag of coins. She tells him that there's no need to investigate and admits that she believes him this time around. Of course, our boy is shocked that she believed him so easily because of how bad his reputation is, especially considering the fact that his evil adopted brother keeps trying to make him look bad. Valen hands him the money and tells him that she'll take only the principal, which is 50 coins, leaving the rest for him. After this agreement, she suddenly informs him that she wants to have a rest, so she asks him to go to the bedroom. Of course, our boy doesn't hesitate to do as she asks, and then casually strolls to the room. But before he leaves, he makes sure to give Lai Yudeng a really taunting look while basking in his little victory. Not surprisingly, the evil adopted brother is absolutely furious that he couldn't make a fool out of Lai Yuguo on this occasion. enraged by what just happened. He clenches his fan so much that it almost breaks. Bro looks like a monster because of how angry he is. But even though Lai Yuguo won this round today, this hater is still very determined to make Nalan Meng give up on him sooner or later. It's practically his life's ambition to get rid of our boy, so he's ready to do whatever it takes as far as he's concerned. He's going to win Nalan Meng's heart and get rid of the kept man, so he wants our boy to just wait and see. The scene shifts once again, and this time, we find ourselves in the bedroom of the city lord. Being the husband of the ruler of an entire city that's literally named after her, you'd think that Lai Yiguo would enjoy his, especially since he's married to the most beautiful woman around. Unfortunately, that's not the case for this fellow, because even though they've been married for years, the kept man has never shared a bed with Nalan. As you might have guessed, she's the one who does want him to touch her. And you can't really blame her, since Lai Yuguo has been a really big loser all around since they got married. Since that's practically how the marriage has been, the writer doesn't bother climbing Naoin's bed. He already knows how things work, so he takes out the trusty mat which sleep on. It's not like he's never tried to share a bed with his wife before, though. In fact, Lai Yuguo used to try his luck with her every night, but it always ends with the same result, because he gets kicked away each time. Knowing that this night might not be any different, he decides not to even bother trying his luck, so he grabs the mat and makes his way to the guest room. Since the odds of her accepting him are still pretty low, Nalan is actually surprised when she hears him say this. She didn't expect that he'd willingly offer to sleep in the guest room, since she's used to his futile efforts to sleep with her. Realizing just how far she's pushed him, she starts to wonder if she has been too harsh to him. While Nalan is actually thinking hard about her behavior towards her husband, we see our boy wide awake in the guest room. He looks pretty mad too, with his arms crossed, as he also thinks about the situation, feeling that he'd rather find a treasure in the guest room than make a fool of himself in front of her. The writer feels this way because he remembers how Lai Yuguo's father was literally the god of war in the story. Lai Guangyi has a precious manual called the Energy Intensify Guide. This manual is able to energize the whole body, and according to his design as the creator of the novel he is currently living in, he's certain that it should be somewhere in the guest room. With this in mind, he looks around the room and starts searching for the Energy Intensify manual. It only takes a few seconds for him to set his eyes on the familiar picture frame hung on the wall. It's a picture of two shrimps, and from the wide smile on his face, you can tell that he's already seen the precious manual he's looking for. Without wasting another second, he reaches for the picture frame and lifts up the sheet on the top. Being the one who designed the room in the first place, he already knows that there's a secret compartment behind the first sheet of paper. Sure enough, when he removes his shrimp picture, he unveils the Energy Intensify Guide. Apparently, there are also levels of cultivation methods and weapons in their world. They're ranked from the lowest to the highest and are listed as follows. First, you've got the iron level, then they have the bronze level. Next is the silver level, right before you get up to the gold level, and then at the highest point in the pinnacle of cultivation in this novel world, they've got something called the sacred level. Wai Yuguo smiles in excitement when he finally sees the Energy Intensify Guide right in his hands. It's like he's just won a trophy, so he's really glad about his finding, especially since this precious manual is going to help him a lot in this world. As if he wasn't already happy enough, it turns out that the Energy Intensify Guide is at the gold level, which is actually the most valued cultivation method in the whole city. With that little treasure hunt done and dusted, our boy decides to do something else, which can also help him quite a lot in the future. Remember that seed that Shi Desheng gave him in one of the stalls? Well, the clever writer has it in his hand right now. It's a really precious seed, and it appears that we are about to find out just why that's the case. All of a sudden, he opens the window in the guest room and reveals a small patch by the side of the room. There, he tosses the seed out to the patch, because the moon's spirit grass only grows under the moonlight. Immediately, the seed touches the ground. It begins to shine brightly, and we finally get to see what's so special about the seed. Our boy admits that it's a really unusual flower, claiming that it blooms in a moment, as long as it's under the moon. Beside that, it can gather spiritual chai around and be greatly helpful for cultivation. And since that's the case, he decides that it's time for him to make good use of the opportunity, seeing that the moonflower is already blooming and trapping spiritual energy in it. He figures that it's a good time to start his own cultivation since the energy from the flower would help improve his cultivation even more. Just like that, he starts to cultivate, and with the help of the Energy Intensify guide, there's no doubt that he's about to make a lot of progress in a very short time. Thanks to the flower that he just planted, spiritual chi is coming to him continuously, and it's only a matter of time before he converts all of that into his own spiritual chi. While the clever writer is outside that night, engaging in some much-needed self-development, his pretty wife is still in her room, feeling bad about what happened earlier. She stares up at the night sky, still feeling puzzled because she's not sure if she's been too harsh to Liu. Well, she's literally losing sleep because of it, while the man in question is busy making himself an even better man. Mung keeps staring out into space, thinking that she might have been too hard on her husband all these years, and it makes you wonder why she suddenly cares if she's mean to him. The scene changes and morning comes. That morning, Liu Gu wakes up to a really big shock. It turns out that his cultivation the previous night really did a lot for him, thanks to the Energy Intensify guide his father left behind, as well as the moon grass seed that he planted outside his window to help supply him with enough spiritual chi needed. Because of that boost, he was able to become a marshal junior from being a marshal apprentice in just a single night. In other words, he managed to leave the lowest level and made it to the same level as his evil adopted brother in a night when it probably took Lai Yuting several years to reach that level. Yugo is elated by this new development because in theory, there's a huge gap between every level. The insanely fast progress leaves our boy in awe, making him feel that he might actually be a cultivation genius. Unfortunately, this joy is cut short when something strange happens all of a sudden. The writer is shocked when he sees that he's bleeding from his nose, so he realizes that something is really wrong. Immediately, he flops down to the ground and watches in shock as he continues to bleed. He realizes that the precious manual he used is a really good guide, because his current situation actually means that he's got too much energy from it. He's still struggling with the blood rushing from his nose when Manga appears looking really concerned. She's surprised that he's already up so early. But before he can even say anything, Liu Guo turns away from her and tells her not to come into the room. Just by looking at him, the city lord can already interpret what's going on. Velen concludes that she must have interrupted his pleasurable hour and gets really mad at him, so she marches away in huff. Her cheeks turn red, suggesting that she's really embarrassed by what just happened. On the other hand, Liu Guo is just really confused because now he figures that she just misunderstood him completely. Valen probably thinks he was doing something else all by himself in the room. But clearly, that wasn't what he was indulging in when she stumbled upon him. Tears run down his face because he realizes how awkward the whole situation was just now. So he tries to call her back, asking her to wait, but she just ignores him and keeps steaming off. As much as she's mad about whatever she thinks he did, Nellen can't help but admit one thing. Sure, she thinks that he's a real lecher, but she can't deny the fact that he didn't go outside to flirt with other women this time around. At least, as far as she knows, all he did was sleep alone in the guest room so that he could enjoy the so-called sexy pleasure she thinks she caught him doing. That afternoon, out on the streets of Nellen City, we see the famous kept man walking around once again. All the while, he can only think about his wife back at him. He thinks about the situation and decides that he really needs to come up with a good plan so that he can change her impression of him. But then again, even though that's something he has to do quickly, he also admits that the most important thing right now is to earn money. After all, it's only after the city lord's mansion has become rich that the fate of Nalan City can be changed at all. Our boy is still very much on a mission to save the city from destruction that awaits in a few months. He's seen the future because he wrote it himself, so he already knows when the doomsday will arrive. Thankfully, he's got a plan to avoid that tragic fate. And it all starts with making the city rich. As he continues to walk through the city, he remembers how he's already exhausted the moon spirit grass from the previous night. He needs that flower if he wants to make any more progress, so now he is headed straight to the fat businessman who gave him the first seed before, The clever writer knows that he's going to need Shi Disheng's help again, so he's currently looking for the fat man. Our boy walks into a lonely alley and suddenly realizes that something isn't right. He's got a bad feeling about the place, so he turns around and begins scanning the area for anything out of place. He's very uncomfortable with the way the place is, and his acute author's thinking tells him that something is actually wrong. While he's still trying to figure out what the problem might be, loud gallop noises fill the air, and in a matter of seconds, he's surrounded by swordsmen on horses. Clearly, this is an ambush, and he doesn't need any special senses to tell him that. The strange horsemen are armed with huge knives, and they inform him that someone has paid them to kill the kept man. Rather than being terrified or starting to panic, our boy remains chill as ice. He calmly asks the assassins who sent them and how much they were paid, before claiming that he can pay them double of whatever they got the first time. Unfortunately, the guys are already familiar with the gambling deadbeat that is Lai Yuguo. His reputation goes before him, so they don't believe that he can actually afford to do what he's saying. With this in mind, they charge at him with their weapons, determined to kill him, realizing that they don't believe him. Our boy is furious that they would even dare look down on him, enraged by their audacity and disbelief. He decides that he's going to try out the results of his cultivation on them. I mean, he just made a big leap from martial apprentice to martial junior in just one night. So it's not so surprising that he's eager to test out all the new abilities he must have acquired. Without wasting another second, the clever author balls up his fists and activates a new skill called Fire Punch. The assassins are still riding toward him as fast as they can when he unveils this new power, and by the time his fist is covered in a huge ball of flames, it's already too late for them to retreat because of how close they've gotten. Yu Guo casually uses the first guy as a scapegoat by landing the huge fire punch in his chest. The impact sends the guy flying in the air like a piece of paper, and when the other two assassins see this, a wave of horror washes over them. They're shocked that the punch has the power of a martial junior, because the last time they checked, Lai Yuguo was still a useless martial apprentice. Well, too bad for them today, because the loser-kept man who everyone always looked down upon is no longer the same person. He's now much more powerful than before, and even probably one of the strongest people in the city, so clearly it was a really bad idea to try and assassinate him with just sticks and big blades. Lai Yuguo stares at his smoking fist with a wide smile on his face. Thanks to the cultivation method of the Energy Intensify Guide, a simple elementary punch can even be more powerful than before. At this point, the purple-haired story villain is feeling invincible, so his confidence level shoots out the roof. With his new power, he's brave enough to joke around with the terrified men who were sent to kill him, and so he casually offers to spare their lives if they tell him who is pulling the strings. Even though Lai Yuguo just knocked the living daylight out of the first guy, the other assassins refuse to back down. They're certainly taken aback by the fact that he managed to reach such a powerful level, but they don't run away. For some reason, the assassins begin to feel that they can take Lai Yuguo down. The leader of the gang urges his men not to be afraid and encourages them to fight with him because he believes that they can certainly defeat a mere martial junior. It's pretty surprising because they were all very terrified a few moments ago and now they're not afraid anymore. At this point, the kept man is shocked that they're not even cowed by his provocation, and then he takes a second look, only for him to realize that the mercenaries are actually more in number than he thought initially. With this in mind, he concludes that he's outnumbered. Even with his new powers, it would still be a risky move to think of fighting all of them by himself. Seeing a head-on fight isn't the best choice, while Yugo decides that he has to figure another way out of the sticky situation. While he's still thinking about it, something very surprising happens all of a sudden. Out of the blue, a familiar warrior makes his way into the scene. It turns out to be Guan Yongfen. The author had helped a lot recently, and as you'd expect, he's arrived to make sure that nothing bad happens to Lai Yuguo. The King of Thieves enters the scene with his sword in hand, telling the assassins to stop whatever they think they're doing. Guan Yongfen is ready to take on anyone who dares to hurt his benefactor, and with this in mind, he doesn't hesitate to strike down all the mercenaries from their horses. The guy's attacks are so swift that he takes out all the troublemakers before they can even realize what's going on. Of course, The author is also really surprised by this shocking turn of events because he never expected the one-eyed man to come to his rescue. While he's still trying to wrap his head around what just happened, Guan Yunfen successfully subdues the assassins and then points his sword to the leader's neck so that he can interrogate them. The terrified gang leader just stays on his knees trembling as his life flashes before his eyes. The king of thieves asks him to reveal the person who sent them to kill the kept man, and the guys just start stuttering in fear. He looks like he's about to shit his pants because of how scared he is. It's funny because La Yuguo already asked him the same question before, but he was feeling invincible or something. Anyway, now that Guan Yunfen asks him once again to reveal the identity of the person who sent them, the leader of the assassins finally confesses that it was Lai Yuning who paid them to kill the kept man. Of course, our boy is shocked when he hears that his adopted brother is secretly trying to kill him. He can't believe what he just said, but the gang leader just confirms it for the second time, claiming that the evil brother always lets them off the hook whenever they go to rob the farmers because, in return, they give him half of everything they steal each time. The gang leader confesses everything with tears in his eyes, but not because he's sorry or anything. Rather, it's probably because he knows that a bright like Guan Yunfen won't let him love after the confession. The guy goes on to reveal that Lai Yuting assigned them to carry out the hymn the previous night, and claims that they were also forced to accept the assignment. The second part doesn't seem too believable considering that they were already working with the scumbag brother before then. They practically become partners because Lai Yuting has been letting them go in exchange for half of their steals, but the leader of the gang insists that they were forced and begs the king of thieves to spare their lives. In response, Guan Yunfen simply asks the dumb hitman if he really thinks that they'll spare their lives. I mean, he already knows that they'd obviously run back to inform Lai Yuting of what happened, so the ruthless king of thieves decides that it's not going to happen. And before our boy can even have a say, he swiftly uses his giant sword to take the leader's head off like the lid of a champagne bottle, just as he's decapitating the guy. Guan Yunfen reveals that he'll also go to kill Lai Yuting afterward, so this explains why he doesn't even think twice before sending the gang leader to the afterlife. Before the king of thieves can embark on his brutal revenge-themed killing spree, our boy tells him to wait all of a sudden. Lai Yuguo knows far too well that killing his douchebag brother without solid evidence will only make his reputation worse, so he feels that they shouldn't just make hasty decisions in anger. Hearing this, Guan Yunfen agrees with him, so he asks the clever author what he feels they should do instead. Surely our boy is going to come up with an awesome plan to have his revenge without putting his neck on the line. But it turns out that it's not as exciting as the king of thieves thought it would be. All of a sudden, Lai Yuguo suggests that they should work and make money for the city lord's mansion rather than kill Lai Yuding for his betrayal. The clever writer explains that they won't even be afraid of Lai Yuding coming back to make any trouble, but that's only if the kept man can make Nalan City prosperous and make the people rich. After listening to the brilliant plan, Guan Yunfen admits that it's completely different from his train of thought. As much as it isn't exactly the robber's belief, he suddenly goes on his knees to show his respect. Guan Yunfen claims that he often robs the rich to assist the poor, but admits that even his so-called good deeds just prove that he's still really short-sighted. The king of thieves continues to kneel before the kept man, deeply impressed by how Lai Yuguo is able to make plans for the long run. With a mind like that, Guan Yunfen has no doubts that someone like our boy will definitely save the people of Nalan City. You'd think that this praise would simply end here, but all of a sudden, the veteran robber reveals that he would like to follow in the author's footsteps. The guy actually wants to devote himself to the kept man, and just like anyone else would be, Lai Yuguo is a little bit overwhelmed by it. In response, he just laughs for a while and then tells the guy to get back on his feet. There's a very good chance that our boy already knew that something like this would happen, because even though he seems surprised, he looks pretty happy about the fact that Guan Yunfen has the power of a martial spirit. With this in mind, he figures that Ikyung will certainly lose an important helper if he takes the king of thieves under his wings as a disciple or something. The thought of this makes a wide smirk crawl up Lai Yuguo's face, especially since he knows that such a thing would make the percentage of his plot armor as the villain to rise. Sure enough, it doesn't take long for our boy to see results. Upon checking his status window, he sees that the current protagonist's plot armor is at 97%. On the other hand, the current percentage of the villain plot armor is just 3. He's surprised and delighted to see that his own plot armor rose indeed and turned to 3%. Besides that, he also notices some other things, like the fact that he now has new skills and a few chances. Intrigued by this, he decides to take a closer look, so he can observe these new updates better. Lai Yugu reads the update message, talking about something called primary luck. This new addition allows him to get a few chances to meet some important people that are difficult to come across because they're not even in his original plot in the first place. Seeing this, our boy confirms that this is the same reason why protagonists in novels usually find beauties and get treasures even when they pick up trash. The fact that this author has just acquired the same secret weapon that gives heroes of stories extreme luck just makes our boy very happy. The gears in his head begin to turn all of a sudden, and the knowing grin just remains on his face because he already knows that he's certainly going to be as powerful and fortunate as Ikyong. While he's thinking about all of this, Guan Yunfen seems really confused. He doesn't know what's going on in the kept man's mind. And while he's probably still wondering, our boy turns around all of a sudden and suggests that they head to the market to make some money. La Yuguo is now very excited and confident because he's so sure that he'll come across someone that will help him make some good money at the market. The scene changes and we see the two guys walking down the streets of Nelan City. Not surprisingly, our boy's first stop when he reaches the market is Shidesheng's stall. The fat merchant wanted them to become good business partners, so when he sees the kept man back in his store after only a few days, he's very excited about it. More so, it appears that our boy has returned with so many good things to sell this time around. Wai Yuguo confirms the fat man's guess, revealing that he's brought sugar, salt, and some other spices as well. Clearly, he's ready to make bank once again, because he made a great deal the last time he was there, even though he sold just salt back then. So now, imagine how much he can make when he sells all of these spices and sugar to Shida Sheng this time. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Lai Yuguo chuckles internally while showing the goods to the fat man, because he got them really cheap on the aluminum system while Shida Sheng is willing to pay insane amounts for them, just because they're very scarce in the novel world. Unfortunately, this plan doesn't go the way the author wants because it appears that he's breaking the law. Shida Sheng is horrified when he hears that the kept man is selling salt because for some reason, anyone caught selling illegal salt will get the death penalty. Feeling worried for the safety of his new business partner, the fat man tells Lai Yuguo to hide the salt immediately so that he doesn't get caught. A look of exhaustion is plastered on our boy's face when he hears this. Apparently, he somehow forgot something that he wrote in his novel about how salt was difficult to produce in ancient times. Even though it was not easy to make salt, it was clearly still very useful and demanded, which explains why it's so expensive and why it's not something that everyone can sell easily. In this story, salt can't be sold by just anyone except the officially recognized organizations. Hearing this, La Yuguo laughs nervously and thanks Shida Sheng for reminding him, because he knows that it would be terrible if a malicious person found the salt. He says this feeling a little relieved, but he has no idea that someone is secretly watching him from the shadows. This masked ninja dude overhears everything that was said clearly and is satisfied when he catches the kept man selling illegal salt. Even though salt can't be sold on the streets like other commodities, our boy still has other unregulated goods up for sale, like the 4 boxes of alcohol he's brought along with him to the market. The fat man's eyes pop out in excitement when he sees the bottles, because they're actually made of glass, which means that they're going to be really expensive. Our boy just laughs nervously again, because he realizes that he made another mistake. Glass is supposed to be rare in these ancient times, so it's pretty high profile to reveal so many glass bottles at the same time. In other words, such behavior will only draw unnecessary attention to him rather quickly. While he's still thinking about his mistake, Shida Sheng hugs his leg tightly like a weirdo and begs him to sell all of the bottles of wine to him. Lai Yuguo is clearly pissed by the short man holding him tightly, but he admits that he can sell the bottles to him only if he doesn't tell other merchants about it. He asks Shidashang to offer him a price, so the merchant finally lets go of his leg. The fat man assures Lai Yuguo that he won't tell anyone about it, because as a successful businessman like himself, he already knows that only a fool will tell other merchants about something as amazing as this. They're literally his competition, and now he has access to something they don't, so why in the world would he tell them about it? As for the price he's willing to pay, he grabs his abacus and begins to calculate the value of the goods. After a while, he finishes the math and sternly reveals that he'll offer 80,000 coins for the alcohol our boy brought to his store.
As shocked as he is, he just stays silent and processes the information for a while because he wouldn't want to lose his composure in front of Shidashang. On the outside, Lai Yuguo looks like he's not moved by what he just heard. But on the inside, it's a whole different story. Our boy is extremely excited by the offer because he never even earned so much money from writing in his previous life. The fat man gives him a gold bracelet, suggesting that this will be the payment for all the goods because it is worth 100,000 coins. Our boy takes the item and inspects it, only to realize that it's an interspatial bracelet. He's surprised to see something like that, and the fat man confirms it, telling the kept man that he'll see the money inside it once he concentrates his mind. Daxing claims that this is just a low-level interspatial bracelet produced by the genuine essence sect. It is said that the high-level interspatial bracelet can even store a house of 300 square meters inside it. The merchant reveals all of this to Lai Yuguo and concludes by saying that the genuine essence sect is a successful model for the businessman. He says so because the sect can make unusual things like magic tools, magic pills, and even elixirs. Most people can't produce such things, and that's why they see themselves having to buy the rare items from the genuine essence sect. After being told this short tale, the author suddenly reminds us that the genuine essence sect is the same sect that the protagonist, Ikkyong, belongs to. It just makes him a little pissed when he remembers because it just reminds him how lucky the hero of the story is. Sure, he wrote the story, but he probably never imagined that making Ikkyong's life so perfect would backfire someday. He suddenly informs Shidashang that he wants to buy some magic tools. Being the opportunistic businessman he is, Shidashang doesn't hesitate to show our boy the way. The man claims that there happens to be a trade caravan going to the capital soon, and reveals that they sell magic tools as well as demon servants, especially the fox demons. On the way to the trade caravan, the fat man informs him that some of the demon servants are pretty and sexy. He also reveals how rich men like to buy the demon servants as maids, claiming that they also serve other duties for their buyers when night falls. The naughty man laughs while saying this, and then encourages Lai Yuguo to get one of the demon slave girls for himself. The creepy man assures the author that he'll enjoy anyone he buys, but of course, Lai Yuguo is no longer the man he used to be a few days ago. As they walk through this real-life version of the dark web, our boy begins to realize that it was really inappropriate of him to write about such a thing in his novel. He regrets adding this part to the book, and feels that it's not suitable to add in human trade in the novel. But then again, you can't really blame him for including it, especially since it was a really common business in ancient society. After all, there were Kunlun slaves even in the flourishing period of the Tang dynasty. In the end, as unsavory as it looks, it was actually a part of ancient history. So he doesn't reprimand himself too much for adding it to his novel. Just then, he comes across a signpost, which states that he's now a Jew's commercial firm. He's very surprised to see this, and it's actually a really big deal because he knows that this is the same place where Ikkyong will meet another important helper in the story. Since that's the case, he changes his mind, and decides not to leave that section of the market so soon. On the other hand, the fat man now wants to go and see if he can find any good one among the slaves on sale. He reveals that he'd like to take Guan Yunfin along with him, and quickly drags the guy away before Lai Yuguo can even say anything about it. He doesn't really mind anyway, so he waves them and goes back to his own plans. Shidashang wraps his arm around the king of thieves with a cunning smile on his face. But Guan Yunfin just remains as emotionless as he's always been. Once those two are out of the picture, the author begins to explore the different caravans, hoping to come across the important helper. After a while, he gets to a point where he hears loud thumps coming out of a cage, and he confirms that it's just like he thought. He tries to take a closer look and inspect the place, but he's suddenly blocked by a strange man who recognizes him. The old baldy greets him and asks if he can help the kept man with anything. But of course, Igua is just pissed that he got intercepted. Turns out that this nosy man is actually Zhu 8, the manager of Zhu's commercial firm. Being the one who created the character in the first place, the author already knows that the man is very cunning, so he decides that he'll need to come up with a special way to deal with him. With this in mind, he goes straight to the point and asks Zhu 8 who the raunchy woman inside the cage is. In response, the manager reveals that the woman is a refugee that he picked up from the wilderness. He claims that she is almost dying and admits that he wants to sell her at a low price. Unfortunately, she's in such bad shape that nobody is willing to pay for her even at a very low rate. After learning that nobody wants the dying refugee he captured, he quickly comes up with a clever plan to make the manager very vulnerable. Yugwa sees the state of things and suggests that the Jew commercial firm's business will be affected if other people found out that there is a dying person in their custody. Our boy points this out, knowing that it would get the cunning baldy rattled, and sure enough, it works. Zhu 8 suddenly begins to panic with huge beads of sweat running down his face as he realizes that he just fell into a trap, not knowing what else to do. He anxiously asks the kept man what he should do about it. In response, our boy reveals that he just happens to need a sitting duck for his cultivation and offers to take the dying woman off the cunning man to solve the tricky problem for him. Hearing this, the manager calls Clever and thanks him, but also pleads with him not to tell anyone about the woman in future. The cunning man laughs nervously and calls You grow clever once again, suggesting that they're just helping each other with this little transaction. The whole time they're talking, we see that the injured woman is still awake, and she overhears everything they talk about, even though she looks like she's about to kick the bucket. A while later, we see the kept man with her. He's brought her out of the cage, and is currently giving her a green pill to swallow. Because of what she heard him say earlier, she feels that he wants him to test drugs for her. But even though she's suspicious of it, she swallows the pill anyway, since she doesn't really have a choice. It only takes a few seconds for the pill to work its magic. The girl is shocked when she sees that all her wounds have suddenly healed. She can't believe her eyes, so she just sits on the floor in shock. Meanwhile, Yugo is glad to see that the pill worked, so he taps her on the head and tells her that it's time for them to go home together. As you can imagine, these words are really overwhelming to someone who probably can't remember the last time she had a home. Before she was abducted by the Zhu commercial firm and caged like a wild animal, she was a refugee who had already lost her real home, so hearing the kept man tell her that she'll have a place to call home just leaves her speechless. The beautiful moment is suddenly ruined when someone bursts into the scene with his sword in hand. He doesn't look very happy because the first thing he does is call Yugwa a bastard. It turns out that this guy has come for the girl that our boy just rescued, so he tells the kept man to stay away from her. And from the look on his face, he's not the kind of person who would repeat himself. The author is taken aback when he hears this stranger trying to intimidate him. Obviously, he's not even slightly threatened by the long-haired swordsman's words, so he asks the guy who the hell he even is. The arrogant stranger seems a little surprised that our boy doesn't know who he is, so he decides to give a proper introduction to Yugwa and the girl he just rescued. This overconfident dude reveals that he's Yi Cheong. But he doesn't stop there. Sure, the kept man already knows that Yi Cheong is the hero of the story, but the boastful protagonist just keeps rambling on about himself. He claims that he's the most handsome Marshal Jr. ever and goes on to say that he'll even be the future Marshal Emperor. Well, that all sounds about right, but he doesn't really have to announce it wherever he goes if you ask me. Anyway, Igua is absolutely gobsmacked when he realizes that the guy standing in front of him is his rival in the original novel. All of a sudden, our boy's boldness disappears, especially when Yi Cheong makes a threatening swing of the sword right in front of him. The protagonist claims that Yugwa has already brainwashed her. With this in mind, the protagonist makes up his mind, stating that he must kill the kept man for the public today. The wrong thing doesn't even make sense because so far, We've not even been told what exactly our boy did wrong, since he got reincarnated into the novel. He really hasn't committed any crimes, so it's starting to look like this self-righteous protagonist is just pinning allegations on him for nothing. Ichiyong throws a powerful jab of his sword, attempting to stab the kept man, but the author manages to evade the attack by the skin of his teeth. He watches the sword go by in that split second, and the only thing he can think about is how fast the guy is. At this point, it becomes clear that he can't run away from the fight. The protagonist is ready to face him head-on, so he figures that he'll have to stand his ground as well. Or at least buy some time for someone to come around and save him. With this in mind, he tells the white-haired girl to go hide somewhere because things are about to get really dangerous. Upon hearing this, she obeys immediately and makes her way out of the scene. You can't blame her since she's clearly terrified. She only just made it out of a cage where she could have died, and now she's finding herself in the middle of a sword fight. I'd hide as fast as I could too if I was her. Anyway, the fight resumes shortly with the protagonist expressing his rage. The guy is absolutely livid about the fact that Lai Yugua would dare dodge his attack. What did you expect, dude? Was the guy supposed to just stand there and let you turn him into a kebab stick? I don't think so. Determined to teach the kept man a lesson, Ichiyong unleashes a second attack. And this time around, it's his powerful lesson sword arts. The guy leaps into the air and goes in for another deadly jab. But this time he's a lot faster and his sword is a lot more lethal. Our boy sees the incoming attack and is thankful that he cultivated the previous night. I mean, he wouldn't have stood a chance against this guy if he was still a mere martial apprentice. The fact that he's on the same level as the protagonist gives him some kind of confidence, enough for him to try and defend himself. Lai Yugua activates his fire punch just like he did earlier, and somehow manages to land the devastating blow right in Ichiyong's gut. Unfortunately, our boy doesn't take the full win in this round. In fact, it almost looks like he took a lot more damage than the protagonist, because while he's landing his deadly fire punch, Ichiyong's essence sword arts appear to rip his tear through his arm. Our boy sees the nasty cut on his arm and applies pressure on it to reduce the bleeding. On the other hand, the protagonist looks like he's just getting started. The flaming punch didn't do anything to him, and he could keep fighting all day. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for the kept man, who's already losing blood. Ichiyong confidently tells Lai Yugo to stop struggling and offers to spare his life if he hands the girl over. The author is already panting a lot after just one round of intense attacks, so he decides to call the protagonist out on his lies. The guy claims that he came for justice, but he tried to kill our boy the moment he met. On top of that, he also wants to take the girl away against her will. None of this sounds very heroic, so the author takes a jab at Ichiyong's ego, mockingly calling him a very righteous man. It appears that this protagonist might actually have a heart buried somewhere under all his arrogance and self-righteousness, because he actually seems touched when Lai Yugua says those words. Ichiyong is stunned for a while, probably thinking about how the kept man might actually be right about him. In this moment of vulnerability, our boy doesn't hesitate to use the opportunity. It turns out that the little reality was just a trick to distract the protagonist so he would let his guard down. Now that Lai Yugua sees a good chance, he grabs it immediately by activating his fire punch a second time and landing another direct hit on Ichiyong. This time, it's a lot more powerful than the first one, so much so that the impact causes the protagonist to lose his sword as he's sent flying. The guy crashes into the ground, but he doesn't look like he's not done fighting yet. Unlike the first time, the arrogant hero is now covered in bruises, confirming that the second punch did a lot of damage. Now, it's a more even fight since both fighters are injured and bleeding. As you can imagine, Ichiyong didn't enjoy that little trick one bit. The guy is furious, so he calls the kept man a rat for slandering him just so that he could use a sneak attack on him. All of a sudden, the tables are turned and it looks like the author might have the upper hand in this battle. At this time, the protagonist is still sitting on his butt, and it's not looking good for him since he's also lost his sword. The situation makes Lai Yugua a lot more confident, so he tells the guy that he's not going to kill him. With so much authority, he soars the protagonist and tells him to get going. A wave of embarrassment washes over Ichiyong when he hears these words come from the author's mouth. He's so ashamed of himself because he's supposed to be a rare genius of the genuine essence sect, so he can't even defeat someone he considers trash. All of a sudden, the guy starts to glow and shiver at the same time, which just looks pretty weird. But as you know, the author already recognizes what's going on. Just then, a massive white gorilla with glowing eyes appears out of nowhere. The raging ape roars just like the protagonist who summoned it. Just like that, the fight that looked like it was over a few moments ago suddenly comes back to life, and our boy who just had the upper hand quickly realizes that he's in a lot of trouble. On the other hand, Ik-young is furious that the kept man would even dare look down upon him, and for this reason, he vows to punish our boy for the sake of justice. Seeing the glowing protagonist and the furious white gorilla at the back, Lai Yugua realizes that Ik-young's blood spirit wakes up ahead of time, which also surprises him. At this point, it becomes pretty clear that he won't be able to win this battle by himself. So he tells the white-haired girl to run as fast as she can to the end of the alley, so she can find a man with a scar in his head. The girl doesn't waste a second before blasting away from there, and without needing a prophet, you already know that our boy wants her to go look for Guan Yunfin. The author watches the girl bolt away from there, and all he can do is pray that she doesn't abandon him. Our boy is so scared right now that he just keeps staring at the girl as she runs away. Unfortunately, this little distraction doesn't end well for him because while he's not paying attention, Ich-young charges at him with insane speed and then knees him right in the gut. The pain is insane as you'd imagine, and the impact sends the author right down to the floor. Just like that, the tables are turned once again and Lai Yugua finds himself on the ground while the protagonist stands over him. Unfortunately, this time around Ich-young doesn't even offer to spare our boy's life. Right now, he's just so pissed that all he wants is to make the kept man suffer. So with this pent-up rage inside of him, he yells for Lai Yugua to go to hell and begins to activate a power move that would most likely kill the author. Just when it looks like the protagonist is finally about to explode, his angry moment is interrupted. Someone suddenly taps his shoulder from behind, and it appears that the contact reverts him to normal. The person ruins Ich-young's moment as his anger quickly vanishes along with the glowing color in his eyes. The person also appears to be very familiar with the protagonist's behavior because the first thing he asks is if Ich-young has been stirring up trouble again. We quickly learn that this more mature character is Simon. The protagonist tries to defend himself, claiming that Lai Yugua started the trouble because he was the one who took the girl away forcefully. Hearing this, Simon turns to look at the injured author who is on the floor and covered in bruises. Seeing the kept man, Simon appears surprised that the person in front of him is the well-known Lai Yugo. A knowing smile creeps up on his face when he realizes who Mr. Lai is, so he informs the troublesome protagonist that the guy he's been fighting with is the husband of the Infanta. Afterward, he also apologizes on Ik-young's behalf, explaining that the bratty kid has no idea about that. Hearing Simon say all of this, the protagonist just gets even more annoyed because he expected his senior brother to punish the kept man. Unfortunately, that's not the case here, because the guy is just busy apologizing to Lai Yugua for Kyung's behavior. As if that wasn't already bad enough for the protagonist, Simon suddenly takes out a purple pill and offers it to the author. He explains that it's their sect's most effective drug for curing wounds and then pleads with our boy to accept the pill. Simon bows before the kept man as he hands over the yellow pill, and in response, Lai Yugua admits that he recognizes him. Well, he's the writer of the story, so it makes sense that he's familiar with the famous Simon Lang, who happens to be the oldest disciple of the genuine essence sect. No wonder Ich-young hasn't been able to protest since he arrived. The annoying kid is probably behaving himself as much as he can because he can imagine the kind of punishment awaiting him back at the sect if he causes any more trouble. Anyway, Simon greets the kept man and confirms that he's the one, but he has no idea what the author is already thinking about just by coming across him. Well, it turns out that Simon, despite being the oldest disciple of the genuine essence sect and the son of their sect leader, ends up becoming a villain in the latter part of the novel. That's right. This mature and responsible senior brother will end up turning into an antagonist in the story. So it makes the author really excuse because now, he's suddenly become friends with another villain in the same story. A smile appears on the kept man's face as he begins to imagine the possibilities that could come from this new encounter. And while he's still pondering on the prospects, his thoughts are interrupted by a familiar voice shouting nearby. It turns out to be Guan Yunfin, who's arrived to save the person he considers his savior, and sure enough, the white-haired girl is following him closely behind. Lai Yugua is a little shocked when he sees them running with insane speed to assist him, and it's almost as if he forgot that he sent for the king of thieves to come help him out. Guan Yunfin quickly runs toward the kept man. He stands between Ichiang and our boy so that he can confront the protagonist. As far as the robber is concerned, the author has never messed with Ichiang, so he wants to know why the arrogant kid tried to kill his benefactor. Shaman Lang sees the display right in front of him and is surprised that the king of thieves, Guan Yunfin, is also friends with the kept man. He never imagined that Lai Yugua would have such a master on his side, so he's quite impressed and finds it all very remarkable. Our boy realizes that things could get out of hand very quickly if he doesn't calm his one-eyed bodyguard down, so he pats Guan Yunfin on the back and explains that it was all a misunderstanding. He laughs nervously and tells the king of thieves that he had a conflict with Ichiang earlier and tells Shaman came around to stop them just in time. Upon hearing this, Guan Yunfin stands down and quickly apologizes to Chang's senior brother, admitting that he misunderstood the situation. The guy tenders his apology and Shaman appears to accept it, but the hot-blooded protagonist feels differently about it. As far as he's concerned, Yuan Yunfin is a notorious robber and as such, a member of the genuine essence sect shouldn't stand on the same side as him. Unfortunately for the boy, Shaman doesn't want to hear any of it. So he tells Ichang to shut the hell up and warns him to stop making a fool of himself. Seeing the protagonist get scolded like a child, Lai Yugua takes the chance to add insult to injury, claiming that Shaman shouldn't blame Chang too much because he's still young and ignorant. The slander surely gets to the boy because the moment he hears the author say this, his blood boils. Despite being extremely furious, he also knows that he can't do anything to the kept man, so he just growls in rage, like a dog with rabies. Even though our boy just took a huge dump on Yikyung's ego, he can't help but admit that it's quite rare for a kid as young as he is to already be a Marshal Jr. He tries to pat the protagonist on the head like a child, but Kyung angrily swats his hand away and warns Linnet to touch him. Simon Lang hears the comment and agrees with it. He might scold the boy a lot, but the truth is that he's really proud of Ikyung. The senior brother reveals that the protagonist has a rare blood spirit and explains that this is the reason why the boy is faster than others when it comes to cultivation. After explaining all of this, Shaman Lang quickly grabs Ikyong and drags him out of the place, but not before thanking the kept man for forgiving the boy. Of course, this just makes the protagonist even more furious than he already was, but just like before, he can't do anything but shoot death glares at the author. Simon claims that they have to hurry back to their sect and promises to visit the author in a few days so that he can show his gratitude. As the genuine Essence sect members leave the scene, there's only one thing on Lai Yugua's mind, and that's the fact that he needs to speed up his cultivation. He is very disturbed by the protagonist's power and feels that he'll need to do a lot more if he wants to stand a chance against Yikyang in the future. The kid is certainly a talent, and if his blood spirit of the storming ape completely wakes up, then he'd have a lot of problems later in the story. While he's deep in thought, the girl he saved earlier suddenly holds his arm, so he turns to look at her. She looks very worried about him and points out how he has wounds all over his body. She asks him if he's alright, so he quickly assures her that he's okay. Wai Yugu must really like the girl because he suddenly caresses her head to calm her down before asking her if she has a name. With a very sad look on her face, she reveals that she actually doesn't have a name, and so, the kept man offers to give her one on the spot. Right at that moment, he comes up with the name Jungsu, so he asks her if she likes it. The girl's purple eyes widen in awe as she hears him say this. She probably doesn't remember the last time someone ever showed her so much kindness, so it must all feel like a dream to her. The white-haired girl claims that it's a great name before thanking the author for it, and just like that, she finally has a name. After that heartwarming moment, Guan Yunfin chimes in and advises our boy to be wary of Simon Lang because the guy is very mean and cunning. The king of thieves still has no idea that he's talking with the person who wrote the story of all their lives, but it's really cool that he's so loyal and looking out for the kept man. In response, Lai Yugua claims that there's K need to be worried, because he believes that such men are greedy and easy to be taken advantage of. After explaining this, he finally tells the king of thieves to stop calling him Mr. The author considers Guan Yunfen his buddy, so he feels that there's no need for all the formality during their conversations. Upon hearing this, the obedient bodyguard decides that he'll call the author Yugua instead, especially since he's always very resourceful. Guan Yunfen says this, but before the author can even respond, something else takes his attention. All of a sudden, he senses something strange concerning the story and has a strong feeling that the villain plot armor has changed again. Without wasting another second, our boy rushes to check the status, and that's when he sees that the villain plot armor has actually gone up to 4.5%. On the other hand, Ikkyong's plot armor as the protagonist has dropped slightly to 95.5%. Seeing the new values with his own eyes, the author concludes that the big fight they had just now must have made his plot armor increase again. It's pretty great news, and it makes him quite happy that he's making progress in the novel. But he also realizes that he has wasted a lot of time walking around the market, so he decides that he's got to meet Deshang. The scene changes, and we see the author has met the fat merchant again. This time, he's returned with Guan Yunfen and Juanxiu by his side. Shi Deshang directs the kept man into the shop, suggesting that he's got some kind of surprise there. But while the fat man seems unnecessarily excited about it, Juanxiu looks very uncomfortable. Deshang notices the kept man's new friend at the back and immediately teases Lai Yugu about it, claiming that our boy has a special taste. The girl overhears him and looks very confused, but the author just ignores the naughty joke and asks Deshang to get to the point already, not wanting to waste any more time. The fat man reveals that they're at the caravan of his friend, Wang Yaokai, who specializes in selling low-level magic treasures. He suddenly pulls out a straw shoe and demonstrates how it can also be a fan that generates a drought with special smells. Deshang starts fanning himself at this point, determined to prove his point so that Yugua would want to buy it, but the boy doesn't show any form of interest in the shoe fan. So the fat man decides to go to the next magic product. Seeing that the first one wasn't the kept man's cup of tea, Deshang reveals the next supposedly cool item that's supposed to blow our boy away. Unfortunately, it turns out to even be worse than the first one. For some reason, the fat man thought it would be a good idea to show Lai Yugu a chamber pot that's also a water bag. The fact that it's a chamber pot should have made him realize that the author won't be interested in it. But being the determined businessman that he is, he makes sure to show just how the product works. Well, this is how the guy became so successful in his business. If he wasn't willing to go to Great Lakes to make a sale, he probably wouldn't be as wealthy as he is today. Anyway, speaking of Great Lakes, Deshang explains that the chamber pot can be filled with 2.5 kilograms of water. It's currently filled with a liquid that sure as hell doesn't look like water, but the fat man doesn't seem to mind. He gulps it down without a second thought, leaving Lai Yugua horrified because he just witnessed someone drink from an actual chamber pot. Sure enough, Deshang most likely just drank shit because he spits out the content immediately. Once the disgusting presentation is out of the way, the owner of the shop tells Lai Yugua that he can choose anything he wants from the pile of items, so the kept man agrees, but he doesn't go in with any high expectations. However, that all changes when Guan Yunfen suddenly informs him that there are silver-level items in there. We see that our boy decides to take a closer look at the items in the shop, and that's when he stumbles upon a few berries that catch his attention. The kept man picks up one of them and then quickly informs the store manager that he's actually interested in them. He admits that the berries aren't bad after all, and in response, Wang Yaokai agrees with him, claiming that it's a really good choice. The store manager reveals that it's the snow spirit fruit and then explains that it's a